No need for a doctor or anything. I'm currently a resident at HCA West, just doing a transitional year. And then inshallah, I'll be transitioning to my main residency, which is in just a couple months from now. I'll be doing diagnostic radiology at Methodist. I think what you guys are doing as far as like this organization goes, I mean, it's awesome that you guys are being very proactive and taking all these steps to kind of compile all these resources. I can tell you a little bit what I did to be able to get into medical school and how I got to my residency choice as well. So I went to University of Houston. I started in 2011. I majored in biology initially, but then I ended up changing that. Everybody who was pre-med did biology. And I know, Zain, I've spoken to you as well about making sure you choose a major, whichever that, interests you, but where you can also kind of get your prereqs in, just because it really doesn't matter what you major in, so long as your GPA is solid. So it was initially biology. I changed it to nutrition because I'm also a type 1 diabetic. And for me personally, I think being a nutrition major would be helpful. And I got to learn a whole lot. I knew about calorie counting and carb counting, but it was very interesting to see how mental health also plays a role. And nutrition in medical school, we don't get a lot of nutrition training. The thing is, because I changed my major a little too late and tacked on a minor in medicine and society, it took me about 5 years to actually graduate through undergrad. And while I was in undergrad, I was definitely working a whole lot. So I was working to support my family. I was working as a scribe, and then I was working at Best Buy as a sales consultant. So I think I was working more than I was studying, and it definitely did take a toll on my grades. So my GPA was not the best, and I'm completely transparent about it. My science GPA was 3.3. My overall GPA was like a 3.2. But in my last 2 years of undergrad, I was like summa cum laude, where I had just gotten literally almost all A's. So my last 2 years of GPA was like about a 3.8 or 3.9. So I graduated with summa cum laude honors, but it doesn't really mean much on paper. It shows that you have a science GPA of 3.3. And as an Asian, it's very hard for us to be able to get into any medical school with a GPA that's that low, even if your MCAT is super high. And I did not have my MCAT in just yet. So I applied to a master's program. I think this master's program is truly amazing. And I will always advocate for it, especially if you're a little bit weaker with your GPA or your MCAT, because it really gives you a chance to stand out as an applicant, and it significantly helps out in medical school. So all of the advanced level courses that you're taking in undergrad right now, they don't help as much, I will be honest. You go through the rigors of like OChem and so forth and so on, but it's not where you're learning about congestive heart failure, the pathophysiology behind it, and the management of it. You're learning more at a molecular level. So I did a master's in medical science. It's not a master's to do anything else, but to just kind of help me get into medical school. This was at TCOM. There's a DO school in Fort Worth, and it's just a 1-year program. And all it is just a dry run of the first year of their medical school. So I was taking courses that other medical students were taking. When I was studying with them, I was taking their exams. But this was our master's program. And in that program, I did extremely well. I got a 4.0. And I was able to, when I was applying then, and then after that program was over, I took my MCAT, did well there. It was the 3-number score. So I got about 11 or so. And I was able to apply, and I was able to pre-match to 2 spots, TCOM as well as my home medical school, which is at Texas A&M. So I ended up going to Texas A&M because they were also offering me a little bit of a scholarship just for how I interviewed and what my stats were, so forth and so on. So they really wanted me there. So I was like, hey, you want to go somewhere where you're wanted as well. So it was nice. And the beautiful thing about Texas A&M, it has a multi-campus approach. So we have campuses. Everybody starts off in College Station, but then we go to our respective campuses, whether it's in Houston, Round Rock, Temple, or Dallas. And I chose Houston because I wanted to come back to home. And my latter half of medical school, or about 2.5 years of medical school, where we do clerkships, which is actually being in the hospital, taking care of patients, and learning from patients through the different services like OB-GYN, pediatrics, internal medicine, surgery. That was done at Methodist. And because of Methodist and me being a little bit more biased towards Methodist because I had my family be treated there as well, I was a scribe there. I was pretty happy with their care. When I was applying to various residencies, I knew I wanted to lean towards staying at Methodist. And so And when I was applying as well, I was trying to choose what I wanted to go into, and I kind of liked everything. I really enjoyed knowing as much as I could about everything, essentially, right? So for me, it was more so internal medicine than anything else. I was really interested in oncology thereafter. But then I came into contact with radiology, and I saw that they also know a lot about everything, and they have to. And then you also get a little bit of procedures with radiology. So I thought it was a little bit of a better combination for me personally, and that's why I ended up choosing grads. And it's a bit of a long journey for sure with the residency, because it's a 5-year program, and then you do a year of fellowship. So right now I'm just in my first year, where it's general medicine, aka it's my transitional year, or you might hear it also be called a prelim year, but you can choose that to be in medicine or surgery. So I did medicine, and the next 4 years are going to be in radiology. So this is just a quick little summary, or just a little walkthrough. I know it's a bit much because I did undergrad for 5 years, then I did a master's, then I had a gap year and got into med school. And from med school is to the residency here. And I got into my number one pick as well, so I don't know if that makes a difference or not, but being able to choose both programs, number one pick, whichever city, so forth and so on, a lot of things have to go right. And I believe the first few years, in order to make sure that I could be back at home and back in Houston and in the medical center, because it's a medical mecca.
From what we talked about before, I'm really glad that it worked out. And I feel like for a lot of people, not everybody gets their first pick. It doesn't work that way for everybody.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it seems like even after you struggled a little bit, you were able to kind of come up with that master's program and, just take it from there.
Exactly.
That's so really good.
If you're really, invested in wanting to pursue medicine, it's an easy journey for sure. So for me, it was 5 years of undergrad, a year of master's, a year off. So it took 7 years to even get into medical school, then 4 years of med school. So that's about 11 years right there. And now I have 6 years of residency. So, and for a more regular individual, you can shave off 3 years, and it's still a very long process, 13 to 16 years or so. You're just training and learning and training and so forth and so on.
You know how a lot of people, they can give up and be discouraged. The pathways, it seems rigorous, it is rigorous. So what other pathway would you have chosen other than medicine? Because that's a concern for a lot of people.
I think you have to keep an open mind. I think I was a little bit more close-minded just because of my own personal experiences, and I had a little bit of blinders on. So I was like, hey, I can't see myself doing anything but this. And that's what kind of helped push me forward. And a little bit more of a background. I mean, my father passed away from cancer back in 2007, back when I was in high school. And then a year later, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. So I had a lot of run-ins with medicine and being in the hospital and so on. When I was in college, I would talk to friends who were in MIF, who were doing computer science, who were doing business and Bauer and whatnot. None of that really appealed to me, and it just didn't click in my head. Science kind of just clicked in my head. I found that to be easy. I found math to be a little bit easy. Didn't enjoy calculus 2 as much as I enjoyed calculus 3, but I went all the way up to calculus 3. So those sort of classes just felt easier for me. So for me, it was just always going to be medicine. I just do my own personal experiences. So I knew I was fighting for something, and there was no option for me to change, but to just keep going forward. I think it really depends on person to person. I think you find a little fire that's inside of you, what makes you passionate about medicine, and kind of hold on to that, because it is a long process. But now that I look back, I'm like, oh, wow. I mean, although it's very long, it feels like it wasn't almost. So I think you just got to keep reminding yourself why you're doing it. And truly do it because you want to do it, not because, your parents want you to become a doctor or anything like that, or you're going to get lots of respect, or, oh my gosh, we're going to be paid a crazy amount of money if you're trying to become real rich and real fast. Yeah, it is definitely not the best route for that. I think you just hold on to what you feel most passionate about. If you find yourself enjoying I would really recommend y'all as college graduates to audit other people's classes. Like I would legit go to my friends' classes and I would sit there and I would try to learn about coding and whatnot. And I saw that it just didn't click in my head. It didn't make sense. I think computer science is a great field. I think there's lots of job opportunities there and there's a lot to be made as far as an income goes. And you have to be very smart to be able to do those different fields as well. So if you have time on a random Thursday, I know certain courses are like Tuesdays and Thursdays, and other ones are Mondays, ones Fridays. Audit some of the courses. Go talk to other people. Go learn about what other people do as well. Try to keep an open mind. Because if you're between one thing or another, give the other thing like a proper shot. So that way you never have any regrets in moving forward.
That's actually a really good point to make. That's something that we can definitely do. I think that's something that's really useful for undergrads. Because, I mean, Muiz and me, like, we both see, like, a lot of, like, our friends, maybe a semester in, 2 semesters in, all these weed out classes, they're kind of just changing their mind, they're changing their majors, changing their career paths. Doing that in an earlier stage, an initial stage, would probably save a lot of time, money, and, regret.
I'm not a big fan of these weed out classes because I know me coming in to college, like I did not do the best in Bio 1 and Chem 1. Everybody else apparently had these old exams where they were recycled questions, so everybody was doing extremely well, whereas I was studying as much as I could, but I wasn't able to break through a certain ceiling. And then when I finally figured out the name of the game, I kind of caught up, but still, it was definitely, a little bit concerning initially, and had I not had the blinders on and had a little bit of thick skin, I would not have been where I am today, because I actually went up to a counselor and spoke with them at U of H. I'm going to be honest, this is where I'm going to dish a little bit on U of H and their counselors. I remember her telling me that, looking at your GPA, you should definitely not apply for medical school. You should try to do something else entirely. Rather than working with me to find me a path to success, she just kind of shut me down entirely. And I don't think that's appropriate.
We're both at UH right now.
Yeah.
And, counselors, advisors.
Yeah.
Muiz, you just talked to a counselor.
I talked to them, but I'm like obviously surface level because we're first years right now, so GPAs will be like high right now, but like later on when it gets more serious, I could totally see that. Like speaking to like even like the advisors, the normal advisors, I can already tell they obviously won't have the drive that we have, but that kind of motivation, like that's very important because you can't just give up. Like I know if I didn't have like someone to like motivate me, and I don't know if you did, but I would be so discouraged by that.
Absolutely, I totally get you. And my first year, I wasn't really in any pre-med organizations. I wasn't in AED or anything of that sort. And so I wasn't around people who were on the same mission as me. So I was a little bit lost, I think it was more so my second year where I joined pre-med. I joined AED. I became an officer there. I started to do more research. I quit Best Buy and I went to Scribe, just be around medicine essentially. I was in the emergency department, so I was getting a little bit more clinical experience as well. And that's when I started to really focus and hone in. But by that time, the damage was already done. A few B's and a C or two will kind of hold the law of averages kind of refrains you from being able to really climb out of that hole. So yeah, I mean, I think you should be around people who are on that same mission as you. I think that's very important. Take advantage of all the various resources that are out there. I think y'all being as proactive as you guys are in your first year is extremely wild. I think that's very appropriate. I mean, I think it's very amazing. I know I was definitely not as driven as y'all are. So kudos to y'all. I think you guys are definitely going to go places as long as you guys can keep this up.
I wanted to also ask you about what are your thoughts on having like an appropriate sort of support system? I know we talked about like-mindedness and being around people that have similar goals and missions to you, but maybe how would you say like your support system was in college?
I think my support system was pretty strong. I had my 4 friends that I was really cool with, 4 or 5 friends, and I was literally it. They were my rock. My best friend who was in Dallas, we were both pre-med, and he ended up failing an exam, and he was like, you know what, I got to reevaluate my life choices. It was Bio 1, and he hopped off the ship pretty quickly earlier on, and I was extremely happy doing computer science. He's a software engineer. So having good friends, you don't need a bunch, but if you have a few solid friends to kind of help remind you, and as long as everybody's motivated. So, and I was also with my wife at that time. At the time, we were just best friends, but she was also motivated. She was in Bauer, so she was doing Bauer. My best friend was doing computer science, and two of my other friends were doing nutrition with me. So we were a little bit of a hodgepodge of like friends, but we all kept each other accountable. Everybody was hungry in their own pathway. But then I also had friends who were in pre-med. First year, definitely not the best work ethic on my end, just because I was working so much, but not really studying, not taking time to be as studious. But as the years progressed, that definitely got better, and then I was a little bit more in tune. And then family is also a crucial thing. My family was understanding as far as, man, I'm working odd hours as a scribe in the emergency department. So sometimes I'd be working 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. Sometimes it'd be like 9 p.m. to 11 a.m. and then sleep would be off and erratic, and then I'd be staying at school very late every day because I'd be doing organization related stuff. So I was an officer in AED. I was the president of United Way, which is a nonprofit organization, and so I was really busy with both those things. But then I also was doing a bunch of research. I was doing 2 different lab researches, and so I just had a whole lot on my plate, and every day was like, I just kept really, really busy, So yeah, I think as long as you have folks that can help you kind of stay on track and can kind of be your support system when you need to vent a little bit, you need to relax a little bit, it makes it all the more doable.
I think I have a pretty solid support system within my family, a few of my friends. So far, so good. The way first year's been, it's not been anything that we couldn't face.
Yeah.
With the harder classes, it will, obviously with like OChem, stuff like that.
Yeah.
OChem, it's gonna get harder.
But those will only help us grow.
Exactly. I mean, when you guys get to that point, I'll be honest with you, I enjoyed my OChem nights. And when I say nights, I truly mean nights. We would be studying till like 2 a.m. And this time it wasn't with my 4 or 5 friends that are in like MIS or Bauer, so forth and so on, but it was with people who are also taking that course, obviously, and everybody, your class starts to dwindle down as far as who's still pursuing medicine and not by that time. And you see the same faces. Everybody's taking Bio 1, Chem 1 at the same time and all that sort of jazz. So you guys kind of progress along in these years, and everybody knows everybody. And you start forming like study groups. And trust me, guys, it's almost fun. It was honestly fun every time we were studying for OChem 1 and 2.
Side note, did you take Bean in college? Mary Bean?
Okay. Bean, yep. Yeah, I was upset in OChem 1 because I took a little bit of a beating. I think I got a B+, and I was very unhappy with it. And so I came back around in OChem 2 and finally got an A.
Nice. Yeah.
Is Dr. Knapp still teaching bio?
Yeah, he teaches microbiome, yeah.
Microbiome, okay. So he was teaching Bio 1 and Bio 2 and microbiome.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so there was a really famous figure amongst every U of H student, Dr. Simon Bach. He was our camp professor, and he was very into, U of H Pride and Cougar Pride, and every Friday everybody had to wear red. He would call you out on it, so forth and so on. He was a great teacher. He was very fair, so it was hard to kind of argue with him, but he was also very sympathetic if there was any issues or concerns. And his class was like, of course, 300 or so people in the room.
Yeah.
But, yeah, he was amazing. I'm still friends with him on Facebook.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. As you're also progressing, make sure that you guys are developing a relationship with these certain professors.
Yeah.
I know there's going to be a lot of people vying for that same position, but it doesn't have to be not every person has to have a science individual or somebody who's a Bio 1 or 2 or so forth and so on, but try to build a relationship with them. And another way you can do so is by hopping on to any of their research studies, or if they have any research projects going on. So that way you can build a rapport, so that way they can, when it comes time for you to ask them for a recommendation letter for medical school, you can do so. Right? They can not only speak about, oh, hey, this guy got an A, 20 other students got an A. What really sets them apart? Because that's what a letter of recommendation is for. On your work ethic, your discipline, your level of compassion, and so forth and so on. So make sure any teacher you come across, if you really vibe with somebody and you're like, hey, you know what, this individual is amazing, you want to learn more from them, try to take that extra time to speak with them after class, try to see if you can hop onto any projects they have running.
How was medical school, like, overall?
Oh man, medical school was fun. It was also brutal. So my medical school experience was a little bit different just because of COVID and whatnot. But the first year and a half, so most schools, what they do is 2 years of pre-clerkship, 2 years of clerkship. Pre-clerkship just means you're in the classroom and you're studying, right? You're learning everything about everything. And then the other 2 years is where you actually get to go and apply that and see the different rotations like OB-GYN, pediatrics. You'll do 6 to 8 weeks of each rotation, and then you'll have a bunch of electives. My medical school was a little bit different, where we did a year and a half of pre-clerkship, where I was only like College Station, going to classes and whatnot for about a year and a half. Then for the other 2.5 years, it was at Methodist, being in a hospital and putting in a full day's work, and then coming home and studying some more on top of that. So second half has its own challenges. The first half has its own challenges. So that's a general overview of what most medical schools will be like. Personally, I think for me, medical school was definitely a lot more fun just because I met a lot of like-minded individuals. I was the guy so everybody in medical school is extremely smart. Everybody has a beautiful work ethic. That's why they're there. And amongst those, like top of the crop folks, you'll start to set yourself apart. So these are the people who care, I guess, a little, relatively speaking, they care less, or they care more, or they're super type A, they're not. I was definitely one of those individuals who was in the library, once again, all day long, all night long, just studying. And that's how I met my friends, those that were studying in the library as well. And that's how we kind of formed a group. That's what I did in my master's program as well. And I'm obviously still friends with them. They came to my wedding and all that. As you do develop lifelong friends throughout this process. Yeah, and because I did my master's, I will be honest that when you start medical school, it's nothing like college. They throw a whole lot of information at you. I'm sure you guys may have heard the phrase, it's like drinking out of a fire hydrant. The water, the amount of knowledge that's coming at you, it's wild. It's wildly inappropriate, honestly. But there's still so much to cover. So what most med schools usually do is that you will do, some basic intro courses the first semester, and you'll also do anatomy the first semester. And so you'll be in a cadaver lab. You'll have a cadaver to dissect. Labs will either be like every other day or every day, quizzes, tests, on the cadavers themselves, as well as paper exams or online exams. We took our exams on like our laptops, but you also have things that you need to identify in the anatomy lab: nerves, arteries, veins, muscles, insertion sites, origin sites. Do you need to be able to know what's going on? And images also get involved at some point in anatomy, but I think anatomy was really fun. But med school, man, every day there was like at least, I want to say about 4 to 5 hours worth of lectures. So what I ended up doing, what a lot of my class actually ended up doing, is that we stopped going to class. I stopped going to class the second week. Everybody else stopped going. Most people stopped going to class the first week or so. And I think the few folks that did go to class, they continued on for all of med school, essentially, because that's just how they learn. Because you figure out how you learn. Right now in undergrad, I want y'all to be able to figure out what works best for y'all. Hey, does Anki work, or is it just simply listening and repeating and then rewriting it out? However you learn best is going to be very crucial. So I figured out my study pattern in my master's program, and then I brought that here into medical school. The thing is, with medical school, unfortunately, there's just so much. You can't spend 4 to 5 hours just listening to the lectures for the first time ever. Usually, it's a lot more than just 4 to 5 hours. I'm just saying on average. But what we would do is we would go home and we would just watch the lecture at 2 times speed. You have to be very efficient with your time. Once we've watched that, then we would re-review those notes, re-review everything. I would rewrite out my notes because that's how I learned, through muscle memory. So I would actually need to cover everything 3 times. I would see the initial time, when I'm watching the lecture on 2 times speed. And then I would write out my own notes. And then I would review those written out notes. By the 3rd time, if I don't know it, then that's an issue. And then I need to focus on those weak points. After the third time, then I would join my friends for group studying. And I found group studying to be very, very lucrative and very helpful. Since I had that master's program under my belt, my first semester was pretty easy, I want to say. So I had more time to kind of help other students. So me and some of my friends who also did the master's program, we ended up creating a facilitative program where we created quizzes for others and we created lesson plans for others, and we shared our notes, and we would host like these facilitator study group sessions a week before the exam, a couple of days, and then provide them with like practice exams. And then we also had them vetted by the professors themselves. Be like, do you guys look over our questions? We're just kind of creating some. And then they ended up actually using certain of our questions in these previous years. It was great. You know, I think I was one of the few ones that was lucky enough to have that opportunity just because of having had the master's program. And I could have been super selfish with my time. You know, I could have just kind of laid back, let them do everything. But if you're able to help out, you should. And you guys seem like those sort of individuals as well. So I'm sure you guys are going to be just fine. And then there was this one course I remember, infectious disease. Yeah, it was such a terrible course. I mean, every day we would get about 8 to 9 hours worth of lecture, and they weren't even like light. Each lecture was super, super, super dense. And you just have to, the way me and my friends, we did it, is we just studied we had to know every word on every slide. It wasn't like you could just know the general gist of it. Medical school is a lot of memorization. Initially, it's like you memorize, and regurgitate. But then there comes a point where they start to transition the questions to be a little bit more critical thinking. And rather than just simply copy and paste onto the test, it's more so apply, manipulate, and then, you know, answer a question or two, you know? So yeah, that one course was very tough for us. It was our course, and at that time, nobody was happy. But we made it out okay. And then clerkship, the second half of medical school, it's fun because now you're not necessarily just stuck studying from like, you know, 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. Or, I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, me and my friends, we would start studying in med school. We'd, let's say, start at like 8 or 9, and we'd study till like 2 or 3 a.m. every day. It's very easy to study about 14 to 16 hours a day. You build up that stamina coming in pretty fast. I had that stamina built up from the master's, so you will be. I mean, if you want to be on top of it, and you have to study every day, you can't do this last minute cramming. That's non-existent in med school. Even the smartest people would not cram. There's only I want to say I only think I met one person in my school that could do so and get away with it, but he was a very amazing, like, critical thinker. Outside of that, everybody studied, whether you did it at school or you did it at home. So second half of med school, it's more so you kind of show up for work now. It's almost like your work. Let's say you're on OB-GYN service. That was my first rotation. I'd show up there at 6 a.m. to pre-round on patients. That means, you know, just to go see them on my own, see how they're doing, any issues or concerns, any updates from the night team, then go let my resident know about it. And then me, resident, and the attending, the head doctor, he or she, we would then round on the patients together. And then we would go into cases and surgeries and so forth and so on. And then you get done by like 5 or 6 p.m., sometimes 7 p.m. Now you're exhausted, you come home. The thing is, every main clerkship has a test at the end. So there's a test at the end of OB-GYN, there's a test at the end of peds, internal medicine, surgery. I'm forgetting another one, but you have to do well on those exams because they play a huge role in you being able to pass that course with flying colors or not. So now after a full day's work of you being at the hospital, even though you're a student and you're learning and you're not directly taking care of the patient, you're still assisting in any way you can. It's still very exhausting and time consuming, and now you got to come home and do practice questions on your world every day and kind of study along. The second half of med school was definitely easier in the sense that you're not just stuck in a classroom or you're not just stuck at home or in the library like studying all day, but it was also harder because you had to still study for a couple of hours and find the time to like feed yourself, clean up after yourself and be a human along with that. So, you know, med school it definitely aged me a lot more than anything else, I'd say. there's no secret sauce behind it or anything. It's just a whole lot of hard work, and it's just a whole lot of grinding. And when I say all of these things, it's common sense, at the end of the day, but it helps when somebody kind of lays it out. So I hope it helps. I'm completely down to have like a part 2 of this interview whenever you guys want to do it. I know I'm working tomorrow. It sucks, yeah, we have to work on weekends as well. But, it'll just be me and you attending tomorrow. So I think tomorrow might not be the best.
Really appreciate all the insight. We will be asking you some more questions in the future. Near
Please,
future.
if I don't respond, bug me again. It's just with medicine, you'll quickly learn that there's a lot to do.